Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October 29th meeting of the Topsfield Conservation Commission. I'd like to welcome all of you tonight, but most importantly, I would like to welcome our newest member, Ben Calella, and I want to wish him a good time here. I hope he enjoys all of us and meeting all of you, and we look forward to having him join in on each meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2022 and H.62 as amended by S.2506, this meeting will be conducted via remote means only. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner: Zoom meeting. See the connection information below to join the meeting by Zoom video conference or by calling in by phone. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Topsfield Town website at topsfield-ma.gov. You may also reach out to Conservation at topsfield-ma.gov or by calling in 978-887-1510 for information and assistance. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and public participation during this meeting shall be by remote means only. And we are being recorded. And is there anyone else who would like to record this meeting? No? All right, we'll start the meeting by a vote that we have needed to take for some time, and we've finally got ourselves all caught up. It's our minutes. And we'll start with the June 11th minutes. Has everyone read them?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, do we have enough to take a?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. All right, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for our June 11th, 2025 meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Good, and how do we vote? Dodge Shamrock, yes.
Jen DeCarlo, aye.
Andrew Mulholland, aye.
Brian Bresnahan, aye.
Good. Do we need a second on that?
No, but Ben.
Let's see what Ben wants to.
Am I supposed to just abstain as I wasn't present? I did read them and they were fine.
You're allowed to approve them if you feel comfortable, but you're welcome to abstain if you don't. So either way.
Ben Kayla, aye.
Great. Do we need a second on those?
Nope, we're all set. We all
Okay, good. All right, next is a draft of our meetings from August 13th, 25. And has everyone read them and are okay to vote on them?
Yes.
Yes.
Then I need a motion then.
I'll make a motion that we accept the meeting minutes for our July 9th, 2025 meeting as written.
I'll second that.
Good, and how do we vote? Dodge Shamrock, aye.
Jen DeCarlo, aye.
Andrew Mulholland, aye.
Brian Bresnahan, aye.
Ben Kayla, aye.
Terrific. Next is September 10th meeting.
Oh, one more in there. August 13th.
Oh, I thought I did August 13th.
We just did August, but we missed the July.
Oh,
so we can do it in any order.
It's not on my paper. Oh, here it is down here. Okay, July 9th. Has everyone read that one?
I could have sworn we did July 9th. We didn't. Why did I skip over it and go right to August?
Yeah, the way it was written down, it goes June, August, September, July. That's why I missed it.
Mine is, I don't, so I could have sworn I did July and I could have totally not done it, but my meeting minutes are written in the correct order. Do you have
Maybe that's the order I sent them to Dogs by email.
Okay. So
okay. All right.
Never mind. So I don't know. You know what? We could do both at the same time just in case.
Yeah. I mean, are we all okay with all?
Yeah.
All the meetings? Yeah. Why don't we, is there anyone who hasn't read them all?
No, they're all good with me.
Okay, then.
So I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we accept all the meeting minutes for June 11th, 2025, July 9th, 2025, August 13th, 2025, and September 10th, 2025 as written.
I'll second that.
Okay, how do we vote? Shamrock, aye?
Jen DeCarlo, aye.
Andrew
Maureen
Mulholland, aye.
Bresnahan. Sorry, Maureen Bresnahan, aye.
Ben Carroll, aye.
Okay, that's terrific. That's finally off the plate for us. I think the goblins are over here early to my house. Next, we're going to discuss, or rather, we're going to discuss the letter. Help me out here, somebody.
Oh, the
With
rodenticides?
Yes, letter.
Yeah, so I'll introduce this topic. We had talked in previous meetings about the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, also known as SGARs, SGAR. We had talked about the possibility of writing a letter to our representatives in support of bills H965 and S644 to ban SGARs in Massachusetts. The commission had previously heard a presentation about this from Lisa, who I believe is here listening. And we also had talked about wanting to do more research before the commissioners wanted to make a decision on whether to submit comments. We had an example letter from Boxford that I had proposed sending a similar one if the commission would like to. I think the deadline to submit comments is in a week or so. So I think if we'd like to, now is the time. But that's up to you all, and if you're interested in doing that. I'm happy to share the example letter if you want to see it.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is for the Boxford one.
Hmm.
I mean, I read the Boxford one. The only thing that I thought was, maybe it's a very nice letter, I think. There's not really any statistics in there or anything like that. I don't know how available that information is, but that's the only thing. I mean, not to belabor this. I know this has been going on for a long time, but it would be nice to have some of that information in there, because it is kind of general in nature, but maybe that's somebody else's fight.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The laws themselves are pretty blanket, to just ban it outright, with no exceptions. Like right now, I think there's an agricultural exception, and then obviously the public health exceptions I think are still in there. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty blanket law. I think the implementation of it, especially with the public health, emergencies, is going to be something that has to kind of get worked through. I don't remember the exact wording of it as it's written, but in general, I'm in support of sending a letter in support of it.
I am too.
And so it's banned federally, and it can be used in commercial. It's still being used, but we're trying to just completely phase it out, subject to certain statutorily recognized exceptions, I guess.
Yeah. I see Lisa has turned her camera on.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to let her say anything about it.
I can't see her. Can we?
Hi, this is Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
At this point, I guess, we had the meeting yesterday at the State House, and Senator Tarr is on board, as is Kristen Kasner, our representative in part of Topsfield, and then Sally Kearns also has co-sponsored it. We have 140 sponsors. And at this point, I think it might be more of just a gesture. But, if you are in favor of it, we would love to have more input, because it is an important issue. There is a lot of data out there, Jennifer. If you're interested, I can certainly share it.
Yeah.
But the issue, as you know from my presentation, is the secondary target animals that are the natural, predator that eat the predator they're the natural predators that would feed on the rodents. And instead of feeding them poison, which poisons the second targeted animal, there was testimony yesterday about just, if you're going to feed them, then feed them contraceptives, which actually decreases the number, which does the same thing that the rodenticides do without harming our environment. There are studies that say that the escars get into songbirds, they're into amphibians, they're into the water supply because mergansers and cormorants are succumbing to it. It's found in their liver, so it's a problem that's becoming more and more known about, and more studies being done about it, and it's just decimating our natural predators that do the job for free.
Well, you convinced me. So I think, yeah, let's vote on it.
Okay, anyone else have questions? Anyone from the public?
I think so. So we would be sending basically a copy and paste of this letter, but substituting out the necessary Boxford to Topsfields.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, shall we take a vote on it? Anyone have a motion to do it?
I can make a motion that we adopt the Boxford anti escar letter for circulation to our politicians, subject to obviously updating it with Topsfield pertinent information.
I'll second that motion.
And how do we vote? Dodd Shamrock, aye?
Jen DeCarlo, aye.
Andrew Mulholland, aye.
Maureen Bresnahan, aye.
Kyle, aye.
All right. Looks
Do we
like,
need a second, or is that all right?
We're all good.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thanks for the good work you're doing. All right, do you want to do the post fair site walk we did next, so that we can spend the rest of our time on the regs and whatnot?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah, so I met out with Dodds, with also Greg, who's the representative for the Topsfield Fair, who did the site visits during the fair, and also Jim from the Topsfield Fair. We
and Greg.
walked,
from
yes,
the-
Greg Hockmuth, the representative who did all the site walk during the fair. So we looked at the fairgrounds in the area that's the main concern for parking. There was a truck that went through the barrier and did donuts in the field. So unfortunately, we have some of the grass is torn up, and it's like a little bit muddy in that one area from that. But overall, the field looks really good. You can't tell where the vehicle tracks are from when they were parking at the fairgrounds.
It's amazing
It's
how
just-
good it looks.
Yeah, in almost all areas, it looks really good. Not that I have experience from past years of how it looked, but everyone else seemed to think it looked great.
Oh,
compared
it
to the
did.
past. So the main thing we need to do is kind of wait until the weather is permissible to patching up like the little area that's been disturbed, which
Which I
might
think
be
we-
next spring, depending on when conditions allow.
Mhm.
But for now, it seems like it's stable. It's in a low point, so it's not going to spread.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. It was.
Yeah.
And you can see it if you drive by. Drive by, you can hardly see any trace of parking that was done there. The cones are going to remain up until spring when they replant or flatten out or however they're going to fix that whole section.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on, we'll get to tonight's meeting, which is to discuss some of our regulations and our rules. And from this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
Okay, so at our past meeting, a discussion came up about our regulations, specifically regarding waivers, and when a waiver is needed, what constitutes a waiver, and then some of the specific criteria that would allow us to grant a waiver, and that also leads into a bigger discussion about the regs in general, um, whether they need any updates to make sure that they are clearer to applicants and to the commission. But I think the main thing that we wanted to discuss during this meeting is how we will interpret our regs, especially regarding waivers for now, given the regs that we have. And then if we have time, we can get into a discussion of what we'd like to potentially change about the regs, to make them easier to understand, especially for ourselves interpreting them, but also for applicants and anyone reading them. I know a lot of work went into these regs, and but I do think sometimes it takes a lot of years of putting them into practice to sort of realize that there are a few things that that are difficult to interpret or might have different ways of interpreting them, um, that could be improved to make things make more sense for everyone, and make sure that the intent of the commission is getting across. So I know Jen had sent me a draft of some regulation changes she had worked on with Heidi. I guess I can share my screen and share the regulations, and we can get into the weeds of how we want to interpret them, or what these issues are. Um, did anyone else want to say anything before we dive into it?
Not necessarily related to the regulations, but I do notice that we have one person also in the meeting, and I'm just wondering if they're here to discuss regulations or if there's a different topic that we might want to, not to derail us immediately.
Oh, that's a good point.
I just want to make sure that we're not going to have someone sitting for an hour while we discuss this if they just wanted to say something.
Yeah, this is a special meeting.
Kathy, I see that you're in the meeting.
Yeah, no need to say anything if you don't want to, but if you'd like to, now's a good time. Otherwise, you can just keep listening in.
Just wanted to check. Sorry for derailing.
It's okay.
Let's see if I can pull this up in a way that looks good on the screen.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't know what the most efficient way to kind of go about this. I don't necessarily think like sitting in a meeting for, because this would be pretty extensive to go through these regulations. I guess I'm more curious, Jackie, about your impression of our regulations. I don't know if you had an opportunity to really kind of delve into them versus, where you came from, regulations where you were, or other regulations that you've looked at.
There's my Zoom screen. Okay, I thought I was muted, but I'm not. Yeah, so I guess my experience with regulations, in Drake, where I worked before, I drafted one update to the regulations and two updates to the bylaw, I think, at different town meetings. And then we also created a land use regulation for use of conservation land. So I do have some experience working on regulations, but the regulations in Drake were a lot simpler compared to Topsfield for sure. I think, I mean, at the time I was going by what the commission was asking for and what they wanted to see in the regulations. We didn't go much beyond that. We were just trying to resolve a few issues specifically to the waiver criteria. Was a big one there. We just wanted to clarify what the waiver criteria were, because beforehand it had been just up to interpretation, and sort of not clear in the regs. So that's my main experience with regs. They don't need to go through town meeting typically, but bylaw changes do. So for us here, we have our bylaw. The bylaw contains more general items, and then the regs explain the details of how the bylaw is going to operate, like what we're looking for in a waiver is one thing, but also like what a wetland is defined as. I guess the other part of your question was about the issues with the waiver, or I forget what the other question
I
was.
didn't touch on the waiver yet.
okay.
I don't think. More just about. I mean, because I think whoever created these regulations, they clearly did do a lot of work.
Yes.
Um, and maybe Maureen can weigh in on this. I deal with a lot of regulations, a lot of this kind of stuff. And I will tell you, over the 10 years, every time I go back to deal with these regs, they're just completely burdensome, and difficult, I think, to deal with. The organization of them is a challenge. And so like a lot of the revisions that I had plugged in, a lot of it was organizational and just consistency related. Um, so I mean, for such a small town, they're just so, I think, overly complicated. I think we were fortunate as a commission over the years to have highly skilled folks that were very motivated and very involved. But on the other hand, it just creates this really challenging um, set of regulations to try to work with and for applicants to comply with. And I think the waiver provision, I mean, some of my comments I think are about how I don't see how you could ever get a waiver the way that the waiver language is drafted. Not that I'd be promoting that in any way, but when Heidi was here, we talked about revising the regs, and we had looked at Ipswich, for example, which is extremely streamlined, has a table of contents, you know exactly where to find information. And my personal opinion is that something like that is probably warranted in this town, Um, but that's just my feedback on it.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I've mostly looked to Jen and Maureen for the more technical interpretation of stuff. Not obviously not as lawyers, but as people that are more versed in reading that kind of thing. And I mean, not to bring up anything like in a specific meeting, but often when things come up, it does tend to get into the weeds pretty quickly. And so I definitely will second that it can be very difficult to sort of interpret them. And me as more of a layperson interpreting them, I'm often just like, okay, Jen, what do you think? So, I mean, I think, for the scope of this meeting, it sounds like our biggest concern is with waivers. And so maybe if we just sort of, we get to start somewhere, you get to eat an elephant, you get to take the first bite. So, maybe we just try and, work on a paragraph or two of it or something.
Yeah, and
know.
if we were, yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. If we were to
Yeah.
streamline the waiver piece of it, well, I guess we'd have to post that change, right? And then vote on it at the next meeting, right, Jackie?
Right. If we're making any change to it, I think we would want to post it and make sure it's like publicized that we are voting to change the regulations. But I think for today, I was thinking we would just sort of discuss and maybe talk about an interpretation of them. Maybe what we want to change about it, but I think let's put it on another agenda if we're going to make a formal motion to change them. And we may also want to have town council review any official draft that we're putting out.
I know over the years, we've tried to issue as few pardons and whatever as possible, because if you do one, waiver for this one, they're going to be true of three more that pop up. And I know that's been a difficult thing for us over the years to issue waivers.
Hmm.
And I think you've been in enough meetings, probably, Andrew, and I know you have, Jen, to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have waiver criteria that matches what the commission is looking for in approving or not approving a project.
Aren't you running through that list for every project though, anyways? I guess that's where I get confused, right? When I read the waiver provisions, it's like, okay, do you have another option? Are you offering mitigation? Um, it seems like you're going right down that checklist, and I have very limited experience, I'll tell you that, but it does seem very redundant.
I think we should be. I think you're right. I mean, I think when a project comes in, we should be looking at what is the project proposing? Where is the work going to take place? Does it trigger the need for a waiver? And in fact, under the regs, if they need a waiver, they're supposed to put that in writing. So,
Yeah.
So much of what we can't forget about as a commission is that when folks come before us, they're advocating for their position, right?
Correct.
And our
Yeah.
job is to, as difficult as it is, our job is to protect the resource areas.
Mhm.
That's it. It's like that simple.
Mhm.
And so, it gets challenging because we have a homeowner sometimes on the meeting, and right next to them, we have their scientist or their engineer, and literally they are advocating to get the project completed. And so we have to be, and not that the people are being deceptive, but I think we have to be cautious that they have checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, in the last meeting, two of those projects were proposing work in the buffer zone, right? And
Mhm.
my understanding is that the buffer zone is a protected resource area. So then they might need to get relief. They need, or they're here to get relief because there is a presumption that that is a protected resource area, that it has values that we have to protect. So I think I'll speak for myself. In maybe it's just needing to be more diligent about reviewing the application before it gets here, making sure I really delve into it. But in neither of those cases were those applicants even going to address waiver if it hadn't been brought up by the commission,
Mhm.
and it wasn't part of their application. And so I'll take ownership of that. Then, before those people even start talking, we need to kind of like make sure that the boxes are checked, and maybe they didn't need a waiver, maybe because this is very complicated.
Yeah.
um but I think that's the challenge, that we have to balance. Not that we have to even balance,
Mhm.
we actually don't have to balance the needs of the homeowner and their engineer or their scientist. I mean,
Yeah. I guess I'm still struggling with what triggers us actually needing to vote on something versus us just approving the project. Like I'm and maybe I'm misremembering, but I honestly, until that last meeting, I cannot think of a time that we explicitly voted on a waiver since I've been on the board. I mean, it's possible that it's happened, but
Yeah.
the more recent memory is obviously much brighter. But and that's not to say that we wouldn't have necessarily approved a waiver. It's just like that was the first time we explicitly made a motion about the waiver and voted on the waiver and then the project. So I guess I'm just still sort of struggling. Is that us having not needed to in the past? When do we need to? And does that need to be part of our more administrative procedure on things, is to make that a more explicit vote going forward for, my understanding is, basically any work in the buffer zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some that doesn't trigger it. I think there, and maybe Jackie, you could speak to that. There is some work that doesn't. I mean, if they come with a notice of intent, that's pretty significant amount of work. There
Right.
are lower, levels of work that maybe wouldn't trigger it. We've definitely voted on it, and in particular, I can recall a project on Perkins Row where there were going to be several houses, and they were going to be. This is before you, Andrew, but that was a significant piece of the overall notice of intent. And we struggled with the waiver at that time too, just because, you have to vote if is it going to be a taking if, if you don't give this relief. But I think in that case, we actually voted against granting the waiver. So it comes up periodically, but maybe the work was just below that threshold.
But I guess I just don't even understand what the threshold is right now. And I mean, I've tried to read the regulations, and it's just a level above my ability to read legalese. So
I
Do you
guess
want
I
me
just
to
wonder if it's
share
implied
screen
when
and
you approve a project. Isn't it applied if every project that's brought before us impacts a buffer zone and you evaluate against those criteria? I almost assume that it's implied, and maybe we're not getting the correct paperwork ahead of time, but approving a project seems like implication of a waiver.
I agree.
so there is work that is not in the buffer zone that is within the riverfront area. So
Okay.
the riverfront area is 200 feet from the bank of a perennial stream. Buffer zone is 100 feet from a number of different resource areas, including a bordering vegetated wetland, which is the most common that we have, um, but also could be like a pond or something different. So projects, the average riverfront project has a buffer zone that is approximately similar to the inner 100 feet of the riverfront area, but it can be slightly different because there are wetlands that are outside the river or stream. But then if it's in that outer 100 feet of the 200-foot riverfront area, and it's far enough away from the wetland, there are projects like that that only fall within the riverfront regulations, which I don't believe our bylaw says anything about in addition. Like our bylaw, I don't think it has anything in addition to the state regulations when it comes to riverfront, except when it's an overlap between riverfront and buffer zone. So I'd say like we have maybe like some fraction of our projects that are only in riverfront but not in buffer zone, and some fraction of projects that are in both riverfront and buffer zone, and some projects that are only in buffer zone. So anything that's in buffer zone, it seems to me like these regs are saying that it would need a waiver. If it's in riverfront, it would need to meet the riverfront criteria, which has its own whole set of requirements. But it wouldn't need to meet anything additional in our bylaw, as far as I understand it.
Yeah. Sorry, not to go on a hopefully very short tangent, but I'm also, I've been confused about this for a little while. How is riverfront not always buffer zone? Because
So
isn't
the
that is a wetland, right? Like, or is it only riparian area? I'm just
So I
confused
think
about
buffer
that.
zone is defined as being within 100 feet of certain resource areas. Riverfront is not one of them.
Okay. Okay.
So riverfront is considered a resource area under the state law. But buffer zone is not considered a resource area under the state law, but it's still like a jurisdictional area under state law. But it is considered a resource area under our bylaw, the buffer zone.
Okay. So, okay. And we don't need to go into the weeds on this section of it, but I just, that's always seemed strange to me. basically a river is not necessarily a resource area in our regulations and bylaws. Is it a more powerful thing? Is it a less not powerful, but like which one trumps the other in terms of they don't trump each other. I don't know what I'm saying.
So-
We don't need to go in the details on this. I don't want to derail us from the discussion on our regs.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think
The
I think
riverfront's big, right?
our bylaw is more strict with the buffer zone alteration in certain ways, but the riverfront regulations are more strict in other ways
Okay.
in places where they overlap. Like riverfront regs have like very specific stormwater standards for projects that are not that don't meet the exemption from stormwater reports, which single family homes, I think, generally meet the exemption for stormwater reports, but say it's not a single family home, and it doesn't meet that. It needs to meet all of the stormwater standards and have a stormwater report for riverfront. There's criteria about mitigation, riverfront area, new development regulations versus redevelopment. There's different rules. But in that specific project that we were discussing last week, it was within the inner riverfront area and the buffer zone. But that was riverfront only under our bylaw, I think. Because this is the other layer of complexity, is that we have areas that are considered riverfront under our bylaw, and we are using the state riverfront regs as our regulation there, but we're only reviewing it. We are only reviewing it under our own authority.
Okay.
Not that that affects the regs that we're implementing, but it's just that the state doesn't care in that case, but we are using their rules for our jurisdictional riverfront.
Right. That part makes sense to me. Anyway, I don't want to. Sorry. Thank you for answering my questions, of course, but I don't want to derail us from the discussion of the waivers and stuff.
But I think in part, and I apologize, I was going to try and, study the various legal documents that are relevant here and get oriented and hopefully, contribute more than I'm ready to do today because I got work things. But isn't it that, that our legal empowerment is derived from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Conservation Commission Act, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Rivers Protection Act, and then our bylaws. So when you've got stacked legislation, it's hierarchical. And we've got our bylaws, and then under the bylaws are our regulations. But everything has to necessarily comport with and comply with all of the regulations and the statutes that sit higher up in the structure from which our authority is derived.
Yes, we have to meet all of the regulations that apply.
So we could, I think, Jackie, you made this point, the waiver provisions from Topsfield's bylaws regulations have to comport with the waiver provisions from the Wetlands Protection Act, right?
They could be more restrictive.
They could be more restrictive, but they couldn't
Yeah.
be less restrictive.
Yeah.
I don't know does the Wetlands Protection Act have a waiver provision? I don't think it does, but I don't know. They have their exemptions, so they have their exempt activities and where the commission has to decide that something is exempt, such as with an RDA, like for utilities. And they have their limited project criteria, but I don't think they have the notion of a waiver. I think that's just a local bylaw thing. But I can check right now. I'm gonna search.
There are, I'm looking at 310 and
Waivers and exemptions. So there is a waiver and exemption
For fees.
Oh, yes, the fee
There-
waiver. Yes.
The
Yes.
fee waiver.
There's different kinds of, like, there's also waivers for like less, like maybe you don't have to supply a
Yep.
plan or something, like procedural.
Right.
Yeah, I just searched the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, and it looks like I see the one relating to timely action schedule and fee provisions. And there's a mention of a waiver of a petitioner's direct case.
I
Which
think
for an
that,
appeal. That's for an appeal.
yeah, and this is kind of diving down a rabbit hole. But I think if we're going to be construing the rules, I think we need to look beyond to make sure that we're in compliance with everything in the hierarchy. And I think it would be a mistake to try to kind of issue spot and address this stuff on the fly. I think that the Massachusetts regulations from the Department of Environmental Protection Act, 310, I think they talk about variances rather than waiver. They use, so I don't know.
I was just searching whether MAC has model regulations, right? And maybe we need to start there because we could certainly compare to what they have. I mean, we don't have all of the resource areas that, coastal community might have a different resource area than clearly we do. But it might be worth it to look at like their model regulations to see how comprehensive they are.
Yeah, I think they at least have a model bylaw. I'm not sure about regulations, but I can definitely find other examples. I do think we have a lot of things in our regulations that are valuable that other towns don't necessarily have that are worth preserving.
Mhm.
So I don't think we should necessarily revert to an example when we have a lot of good things in here that we do that could remain useful. But yeah, I do think they can be inspiration for us. I guess if I can go back to like the, I guess I'll sort of state like the main questions I have for immediately moving forward with this waiver question. I think I want to know to be able to advise applicants what constitutes a waiver. Like, is it them, because sometimes they just mention it in their application, like in the fine print, kind of like, oh, we need a waiver for this. Like, do they need to submit a separate letter to me? Like, what should I be looking for? Should they explain like the specific waiver criteria or the reason they think they need a waiver? Like, what should I be looking for to determine that an applicant has submitted a waiver? And then the other question, what was I thinking? We can talk about that for now. I had another question about waivers, but I forgot.
The numbering is difficult to track.
Well, the regulations do say the applicant may request a waiver by demonstrating in writing that the waiver is necessary to accommodate an overriding public interest or that it is.
Sorry, Jen, could you, which regulation are you reading, or could you share your screen
So-
on the section that you're reading?
I'm on page 1009.
Okay.
And if you're looking
I
at it
can
in
share my
tracked
screen, too.
changes mode, I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot of markup. So
I have the not marked up one right
okay,
now.
yeah, that's probably easier. It's like, because it's just crazy.
Okay.
But
I'm going to 1009.
See, I start back at 1008 though, and I almost feel like every project that's talked about, you're deciding whether or not to grant a waiver.
yeah.
And it doesn't say it needs to be explicitly asked for. It just says that the commission is deciding to grant one based off of any of those criteria below on 1008.
But still, I'm still stuck on really kind of what portions can be waived.
That's up to
So,
our discretion, right? It says the commission
no,
can,
no,
the
no.
application of one or more of the regulations contained in paragraph A through E
So
can
what's
be
A through
waived.
E?
Let's see what's A through E.
Because
Yeah,
it's
see, this is
hard
where
to know what's A through E.
it's kind of that's where it's kind of messed up. The organization of this is
So, A
I
through E
think
defines what we're eligible to waive,
Correct.
and it's A through E of section R-10. A, B, C,
wait,
E. So the portions A through E is the first section, and this is presumptions of significance. Freshwater wetlands are presumed if this, and this. Body
Wait.
waters are presumed to be significant if this, and this.
wait, where do you see that it's referring to like R something or
10
other?
Page 1005. So I'm still, it's confusing. The only sections that have a 1 through E is this R10-4 presumptions and standards A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
I assumed it was the same section that it was within. So I assumed that it was within this section, which notably doesn't have an E, but it has an A, B, and C in this section above it, but I don't know, maybe
Where it
that's
says
not.
no work shall.
And on 1008, you pick back up at F. Is that the F after your E?
So there's F right here.
So it's not even.
There's no E.
It like we have the ability to waive the regulations contained in paragraphs A through E of this section. What do
Yeah,
we
so
have
this
the ability
section.
to waive?
So this section, it doesn't even have an E. It has A through C up here, which does concern waivers. So it sort of makes sense if that's what it meant. Maybe it meant to say A through C
That's a typo.
because this is
How
about waivers.
how would we expect someone to ask for a waiver?
well, right off the bat, it just says no work shall occur in the setback areas except for provided pursuant to paragraph G, which concerns maintenance. And so maybe think about something like the rail trail, that needs maintenance on a regular basis, or pursuant to a waiver provision of this section. So the way I look at it is the buffer zone has 100-foot buffer. You can't do work in it. That's the prohibition, right? And then there are also a couple of exemptions and that are plugged in here, which instead of a waiver, right, it's you have this particular scenario that permits work in the buffer zone. So it would be for lots already developed, which is you see on your screen there.
So the waiver is for section 2.
So it says
Well, remember, it's
Um,
no work shall occur.
considerations. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
It says considerations in association with granting of a waiver shall include, but not be limited to A through C. So I think they still do need a waiver, but then they need to demonstrate that they meet criteria, including but not limited to this. So it's still up to the commission's discretion completely. But these are the guidelines to start with.
And that's where we've seen, well, again, in the limited meetings I've attended, if they offer to populate another area or perform plantings, you're granting a waiver based off those conditions
Yeah.
for them to do that work. That's how I understand it, though.
Yeah. I guess to get back to Jackie's question though is, do people need to write these, a list of things out that explains that they, it's, exemption shall include but not limited to, like 2A, explain how they, fall under that.
Definitely.
So, does that need to be explicitly written somewhere? It might be. I
But
don't think.
the text, kind of the conjunction A, the submission has to address all of the conditions A through D, and the commissioner has to find that no alternatives, mitigating measures, if it's an alteration, state regs, the cited section, overriding public interest or unconstitutional taking. So it's really important that the italicized and is unambiguous. In this first one waiver, section I, sub 1, sub A, there are no alternatives that would allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. I don't think we've ever, required the people are asking for accommodations. I don't think we've ever required them to say that there are no viable alternatives that would be in compliance with the regulations.
So I hear you. There definitely occasionally will come up that I hear the term, alternatives, alternative analysis,
Which is required for riverfront.
which is required for riverfront.
Yeah.
But that, I can probably count on my hands how many times I explicitly remember those words being said. But it sounds like every single thing that comes in front of us.
It makes me uncomfortable that, we're having such difficulty interpreting this.
I can tell you we have definitely done it with bigger projects. I don't know how common it is to build a house in buffer zone. Like that, I don't think that comes up all the time. I
And
feel
I
like
think in the last meeting when the gentleman was building the barn, somebody said it can't be built anywhere else. I mean, it's a simple question, but is that not of the same intent?
oh, for
No
sure.
alternatives that would allow the project to proceed in compliance.
Yes.
Not
They
that
asked
it
him if they
can't be
could
built
build the
anywhere else
barn.
financially. It's no alternatives that would be compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess I assumed that was the question when someone asked him if there was another place that the barn could go that wouldn't touch the buffer zone. And the reply, I think, was anywhere you kind of go on that lot, it's going to be in the buffer zone.
I think that's fair though. That's the right answer. If it
Right.
can't, yeah, if it can only go in buffer zone, then yes, it can't be
So then
put
you went
anywhere.
down to B and C and they offered to mitigate through plantings.
Yeah. No, I think we often and potentially always do hit these topics. I think just again to get back to Jackie's question, do these all need to be explicitly stated somewhere how they all are met in the application? And they might be met, and I just, have never kind of associated the applications that I've read with these exact, regulation lines. Does that need to be more explicitly written somewhere? Like, Jackie, what are you looking for in terms of, help here? Or do you need help? Or is this just, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to know like what the commission expects so that I can advise applicants. I think for me personally, in my interpretation of an application, I'm okay with them just giving me their argument of why we should approve the project where they happen to hit all these points. Like if they happen to hit all these points and answer all my questions, that makes me feel like it meets what we are looking for, then I'm comfortable with it. But then the question is when it's like a gray area, or do we want to make them submit something that's meets specific requirements of what the waiver should look like, just so it's easier? Like maybe we have a worksheet that's for waivers where we make everyone fill out a worksheet. That could be like an easy way to have them demonstrate it in a way that then I can show the commission as like an attachment to the materials that I provide you. So you don't have to read their 50-page narrative to get all that information. And then it's like clear that they understand that they're requesting a waiver and what's required for that. Um,
Yeah, that a worksheet's great. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of a worksheet that says, okay, is this, first of all, is this exempt because it's a house on a lot that was, existing residential dwelling, commercial building as of May 2nd, 2000. Check the box, maybe even write in, when it was developed on a line. Does it meet one of these exemptions? Like, as soon as they go to do something in the buffer zone that's at notice of intent level, then yeah, they should be filling out this waiver form and then going through all of the all the, if there isn't an exemption that applies, then going through the categories, at least until we revisit this, because the way I look at this is, I think we should be thinking about the waiver in terms of Topsfield, right? And what kind of stuff comes to us, what makes sense, how it makes sense to regulate the resource areas. Because we see the same kind of thing come through all the time. Maybe it shouldn't necessarily trigger this. Maybe there should be, like, I looked at other regulations that talked about if you had, literally the shape of, similar to zoning, like if the shape of your lot just didn't allow you to build what you needed to build to make your house functional or whatever it is, then that might trigger some relief. So I just, big picture, I think we should be thinking more along the lines of, what are the scenarios we deal with? Because the regulation, I think, maybe like a best case scenario, but it doesn't necessarily work in this application.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to be granting as few waivers as possible because we have enough exemptions for the things that we would just grant waivers for no matter what. Is
Yeah.
that is that roughly along what you're saying, Jen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, we get plenty of houses where like the whole house is in a buffer zone, right? And it's just not, that's just not practical, to in my opinion, to have to assign a waiver for that situation. Or, like, there should be better, the regulations should better be able to, I don't know, address that. Maybe that's just my personal.
No, I agree, but as written right now, that would require a waiver.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I know we've been, and to Ben's point, we've been implicitly giving those waivers when we just approve the project in general. Am I understanding that correctly as well? Or
I don't
That's how
want to
I
go
would
as
see it
far
too.
as I don't want to go as far as to say that. Sorry to interrupt you, because we have definitely this commission's constantly evolving and changing, definitely, but we have, dealt with waivers for sure. Maybe there's a
Yep.
little, blip on the radar where, we just need to kind of recenter and figure this out. But we definitely have addressed waivers in the past. I will also say too, we get lots of RDNIs,
Mhm.
where the
Yeah.
work is considered negligible. And so, a lot of it depends on what the application is in the first instance. What are they applying for? How are they, how do they present this? And not to say that downplaying it, but we get lots of that kind of stuff where
Mhm.
it's not going to trigger the
Yeah,
same.
a side note on the RDNIs is that I sort of think that for hazardous tree removals, they should be able to do a TCAP if it's under a certain amount of trees. But even if it's in riverfront, because our bylaw or our reg says that if it's in riverfront, it needs an RDNI no matter what to remove hazardous trees. But I've had a lot of applicants who are really like anxious to remove their hazardous tree, and I don't think the town wants the liability of if their tree causes a dangerous situation. And the commission had held it up for a month
Mhm.
because we didn't have a meeting. I think especially with us having meetings only once a month, but that's another topic for another day. Um,
So,
Yeah.
so on that note, though, what do the state bylaws say about removal of trees? Is that something that we can only be more restrictive? So, if the requirement is that they have to come in front of us, we can't. Are we even allowed to have that be at the TCAP level? Like,
yeah,
if that's a state requirement.
the state requirement is that removal of hazardous trees can be done with the approval of the conservation agent. That's how most towns do it.
Okay.
As long as they're just in buffer zone and not in the wetland itself, I think, or in riverfront.
So that, I mean, that makes sense to me. Like that I don't know. We already are approving TCAPs for things in buffer zone. So riverfront, in my mind, is of equal importance. So whether that means more or less important than it was, it's of equal importance. And so, why should we say that one of these trees is, requires coming in front of us explicitly, where some trees were like, oh yeah, that's fine. Jackie can take care of that one. So I'm all in favor of that.
Me too. Well, I was gonna say I looked at Boxford's tree policy tonight, and it was pretty nice. It was like I have it in front of me. Any person proposing to remove one or more trees within a wetland resource area within 100 feet of such area, within 200 feet of a perennial stream, shall contact the commission's administrator for authorization to proceed. Administrator shall inspect the site, determine the number of trees to be removed, location of trees relative to resource area, the need for the project and the process of removal. And then they like set some bars for like if it's 5 trees or less, then administrator just authorizes it. You can never excavate stumps. Anyway, if it seemed like the work was going to like unnecessarily harm the resource area, then that's what would trigger coming to us for some other permit. I'm all for that, especially. I mean, I in the last 10 years, the tree thing has become kind of it's a pain in the neck. Although I will say this is a lot more work for than Jackie, obviously, because that's all anybody wants to do.
Well, it's
Yeah.
either way, I have to go and look at it and decide whether they
Yeah.
can remove it. It's just whether or not I have to make them wait for a meeting and prepare all my notes for you and then go through that process, which I don't think is always necessary if it's a small amount of trees and they're following all our best practices.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'd like to add that to the regs when we get to changing them. I guess going back to the waiver, how about I run through this real quick and just state how I interpret the regulations after us discussing it and clarifying it. And then I'll see if anyone objects, just to make sure I understand. So the waiver provision says that basically we need 4 members present, although we may want to change that just for difficulty of quorums. The way it is right now, we need 4 of the members present to vote to waive our regulations for any work in the buffer zone that does not meet our maintenance definition. The waiver needs to be submitted in writing in some form. It's currently somewhat debatable what form, but they will at least need to submit something stating that they require a waiver, and here are the waiver criteria they think they meet. And then when they submit the waiver, we would consider whether it meets A through C of section 2 here, which generally it's section A in the average case, where we would then measure whether it's an additional 5% or 400 square feet, whether it's limited to already disturbed areas located outside buffer as much as possible. Mitigation is offered to compensate for any impacts, or B or C, depending on what applies in that situation. Those are considerations that we can consider to grant a waiver, but we are not necessarily required to go by them, and it's also not limited to them. So we can make a decision based on other factors, which it seems like down here in these regs are the other factors that we would consider to grant it, despite it not meeting paragraph A through C. So it would need to meet all of these because of the ands. It would need to have no alternatives. It would need to also have mitigation measures, and also have alteration, replication where a wetland is being altered. And then it will also need to be necessary to accommodate a public interest or be necessary to avoid an order that so restricts the use of properties to be unconstitutional taking. Okay, did I get that right, or does anyone disagree with that interpretation?
I think that's a reasonable interpretation, but I think that our problem is that it takes a lot of effort to get there, for us as well as for the citizens.
And I would ask what form in writing requests a waiver?
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of asking you all, because that's the part that is least clear to me
I
after
think
delving into
the
this.
form in writing mean, to include on your RDA, NDA, NOI, ANOI, a section that says, I request, if the determination of applicability or, minimal damage is not satisfied or not met, then, I'm seeking a waiver, and, it should address each of A through D. Because that's the form, waiver provision. Commission may affirmatively vote for members present for regulations contained in paragraphs A through E. The waiver request has been submitted in writing, so whatever form the requester is submitting, and needs to address A through D. Alternatives, mitigating measures, overriding public interest, even if it's like, no, I don't, D is a stretch, overriding public interest, unconstitutional taking, if I can't put my barn here, I can't put it anywhere. It doesn't have to be a slam dunk, but submitted in writing addressing the 4 criteria seems pretty unambiguous. It's part of the text that's clear.
I guess I'm just asking, I guess our current forms don't do the job, then we're saying.
Well, they do submit a narrative typically with the application that often does contain this waiver information to some level of them saying, this is why I need a waiver. This is why I think it meets your waiver criteria. Although the applicants have had questions about what we mean by our waiver criteria and what needs a waiver. So I think the idea of doing like a worksheet or a form could be a good way to guide them to answer the questions in a way that's easy for us to digest. So I think I'll try and draft that for you all to look at a future meeting and see if we want to like adopt it as something to add to our permitting forms, for them to fill out, like maybe maybe they would fill out like for A through C of whether not that here, A through C, like, does your project meet which of these criteria, if any, does your project meet? If not, which of how does it meet all of these waiver criteria? Like, explain to me how, like, fill in the blank. Why does it meet A? Why does it meet B? Why does it meet C and D? And then they can say, for C, they might say not applicable, but they at least have to say something.
Mhm.
We're
I
just
think that would
asking
be
people to be more explicit.
Huh?
We're just asking people to be more explicit, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like, it just they can include a letter, they can include it part of their narrative, and then what that enables us to do at the meeting is if they didn't address it or didn't address it properly, we can say, hey, you got to go back to the drawing table and tell us why there was no other alternative, or you didn't provide mitigation, and so go back to the drawing table. I think, I mean, at least I've sensed it. People feel like they're at the meeting. This is a one night thing, and um sometimes it isn't. Sometimes they got to go back and update the plan and address these issues. So it gives us at least a little leverage to say, hey, go back and deal with this.
When's the 21-day clock start? Don't we have 21 days to rule on these requests?
Yeah, so typically if someone submits an application um early, like before our deadline and before 21 days before the hearing, I ask them if they will fill out the 21-day waiver, which is not this type of waiver, but a different a different type of waiver where I just ask them to sign this thing saying, I understand that and agree to meeting later than 21 days after submitting this application, basically. And that they're sort of like waiving the need for us to meet within 21 days. If they refuse to do that for some reason, we would either have to defy that 21-day criteria or schedule a special meeting for our applicant to
Or
make
they
sure
So,
that
so if we send somebody away from a meeting, they come and we don't think they're prepared.
I think that should toll the clock.
but
oh,
Well,
they
that's
I don't
different.
know. I don't know.
That's different. So we have to open a meeting within 21 days, but we
Okay.
don't have to close the hearing. Um, I think an
they always ask
applicant
for
has to agree
continuance.
to the continuance,
Yeah.
but we usually would vote to continue, and the applicant, I think, technically has to agree to the continuance if we're continuing it. But if the alternative is us not approving their project, they usually would rather continue it than deal with having to like appeal our decision because we didn't. That's my understanding.
The text reads, the commission shall hold a public meeting or hearing as appropriate within 21 days of receipt of the completed application.
Which,
Does
to be
not,
honest, I usually receive it exactly 2 weeks before the meeting because that's our deadline.
So I guess my point is if we convene and we bring them to a meeting, we're saying their application is complete. We shouldn't even bring them if they don't provide what is necessary. Is that not correct?
I
uh,
think I think DEP or maybe it was MACC in a training has said that it's best if it's arguably complete to just open the hearing. It's better to just err on the side of caution and open the hearing, even if it's debatably complete, just to avoid exposing us to an appeal over something like that.
Probably to avoid constructive approval by not taking, you know what I mean? But we have to open it anyway. These people always continue it because, like Jackie said, the alternative is that we take a vote on what they submitted. It's insufficient and then it gets denied.
we file paying a fee.
Yeah, so usually if it's not like if we don't have a DEP number, we won't open the hearing because that's like a clear requirement. Um, although I think we could open it and just continue it. But usually like I'll advise applicants if we don't have a DEP number yet, like you might not want to bother coming to the meeting because if we have any absences, there might be quorum issues in the future.
Mm.
But if they really want to, like I'm not going to stop them from coming in without a DEP number, just to have an initial conversation with us about the project. And then we can wait until they've submitted everything to actually make our just final decision.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, good questions.
So I guess from another administrative standpoint, are we going forward I mean, should we be more explicit about voting on waivers separately from just approving projects? So, okay, so we're going to basically need to take, we're going to be doing a lot more roll call voting.
I sort of read this here as that we would only need this vote if it doesn't meet A through C.
Oh, okay.
A through C.
That just occurred to me now because I don't know if that's how I read it earlier, but may waive the application of one of the more regulations contained in paragraph A through E, which I think meant to say A through C of this section, which is this part above. No
No
work
work.
shall occur
Yeah.
except to, it's kind of like a self-referential, like it's like it goes back and forth between like this one says no work shall occur except as pursuant to waiver provision, which the waiver provision requires the vote, but then the waiver provision says that you can vote to waive one or more of the regulations contained in paragraph A through C, which why would we need to vote if we don't need to waive that because it meets one of A through C? This is something where it just doesn't make sense to me.
I think they're using lowercase there, and what they mean to be referring to. I mean, this is just my interpretation. I think they're referring to A through E, capital letter above, that defines each of the resource areas.
Let's see.
Because there is an A through E. What am I looking at now?
But that's not a regulation, that's a definition.
But it does say that there you can't do anything in those areas. So, like for instance, under
DE.
oh no, maybe it's A through E. The little sorry, I was getting
The
confused.
page.
The R10-4 presumptions of significance and performance standards. Those are that's where the waiver is coming from. So that is A
Oh,
through.
okay. So, okay. Yeah, that changes things. So R10-4 is this section that it's referring to when it
Sorry.
says this section.
Yeah.
And then
It's intentional, yeah.
that's really confusing because there are multiple A's, B's, and C's, etc. Yeah, so freshwater wetlands are presumed significant, etc., except as provided in paragraphs G and I. Bodies of water are presumed significant.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Banks and land underwater are presumed significant. Land subject to flooding is presumed significant, except as otherwise specified in paragraph B of the section regarding vernal pools. E, buffer zones are presumed significant. And then within buffer zones is the setback areas within 100 feet of vernal pool, freshwater bank, downhill boundaries, that sort of. And then it says no work shall occur in the setback areas. So this A through C is still within that A through E.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't change things too much compared to what we were saying before. If this is still within, it just adds
Another layer.
the land subject to flooding and all those other.
No,
Which we typically
No,
don't
no.
always building a house.
two is not within the A through E.
But you see this E here, and then the 1 is after it, like indented from it.
Yeah. And
And
then
then
2
the
goes
2
to
is
that.
also indented from the E. I assume that the indent implies that it's within that section.
Interesting. Maybe.
So this right here are so for example, this for lots already developed with an existing house, etc. So if we read that would be if we're citing it, it would be R 10-4 E
Subsection
2
1.
A.
Yeah.
This would also include 3 then below,
Hmm.
Yeah,
and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
but then it goes back out here to F. So then we're out of it. After this 7, we're out of that A through E.
Right.
So then, okay, so this thing isn't referring to itself. Yeah. Okay.
I must say that this is above my level of understanding of these types of documents, so I am greatly appreciative to the 3 of you, and everyone.
I feel like there has to have been a better way to organize this, but I also don't know if I could come up with it.
We need more letters and symbols.
Well, I think sometimes people they shy away from just being very direct about things like, "Oh, for avoidance of doubt, this is what we mean here," you know? Just say
Avoidance of doubt always means I didn't know what I was saying.
well, I just yeah, you could have said something more articulate, but I think this is not, you know, it just doesn't it's not helpful. But one other thing is just looking this little under subsection 2, no work shall occur in setback areas except for maintenance or under the waiver provision. Considerations in association with granting of a waiver shall include but not be limited to A through C as follows. And then it has like sort of like an additional layer of criteria, I guess. Or would we argue that this supersedes the waiver considerations? I mean, it doesn't really say that, but it's just kind of odd for
Yeah,
lots.
that's what's not clear to me.
Yeah, so for lots already developed with an existing house, commercial building, or other permanent structure as of May 2nd, 2000, proposed activities in the buffer zone not exceeding a total of an additional 5% or 400 square feet, whichever is less, of the buffer zone may be considered only if the proposed activities are located outside the buffer zone as much as possible. Activities are limited to already disturbed areas and mitigation is offered to compensate for any impacts to buffer zone functions and values. So it's like, is there like a further restriction? It sounds like there probably is like an additional restriction being placed on that scenario in addition to the waiver criteria, or does this just take it out of that waiver criteria completely because it's its own special circumstance? I don't.
Yeah, so this circumstance is contained within the A through E because this 2 is within the E.
Yeah.
So if we go below, we can waive the application of the regulations contained in A through E, which makes it seem like if it meets the criteria in A through E, specifically the RE2A or something like that, it meets like the 5% or 400 square feet, then we wouldn't have to waive the regulations contained in A through E if it's less than the 5% or 400 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, I bet that that's what these were. These were like kind of tacked on maybe later or something, that they were a recurring scenario. They just said, you know what, let's just carve out an exception for previously developed lots or lots in existed, almost like grandfather protection for these
Mhm.
types of scenarios, so that you won't, yes, we will allow you to complete work in the buffer zone, but it's going to be subject to these restrictions. Um, but then if you look at for newly formed lots after May 2nd, 2000, there shall be no activities in the buffer zone setback areas. So that doesn't make any sense at all. If does that deprive you of getting a waiver? You know what I mean? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say the addition of these 3 exemptions takes you out of that other analysis under I for waiver, because C would make
Yeah,
C would make no sense. You know what I mean? It would be a situation where people could have a property and that would be a taking. They would have a lot, I mean, and it would be useless because you couldn't get a waiver potentially, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of newly formed lots after May 2000, and I think part of that is because our regulations in Topsfield are so strict that if somebody inquired about a new lot or like making a new subdivision, like conservation agent in the past would have told them like, you can't build a house there because our bylaw does not allow activities in buffer zones on new lots. Like that's kind of what I think that's was the idea behind this. But my issue with this waiver thing, like reading this again, it's like this section 2 says no work shall occur in the setback area except for maintenance or waiver provision. And then this is this waiver provision. It's almost like there are two different waivers here. There's
Yeah.
there's one waiver for this, which is for whether it meets A for C through for buffer zone projects specifically. And then there's this other waiver for where a project can't meet A through C for a buffer zone project, or also can't meet the criteria for a list of other resource areas.
Well, wouldn't that mean we have no right to deny any project that meets the above criteria?
Potentially, yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's kind of how I
That's an
read that.
exception. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do it. I almost feel like we wouldn't have to say anything if they meet those above requirements.
But then the above requirement says that
Sub 6.
considerations shall include but not be limited to. Does that mean that we have to? It like considerations makes it sound like we have to consider these things A through C, but does that mean we have to necessarily go by them? I don't know.
I mean, my feeling is that these were intended to be A and B at the very least were intended to be exemptions that would take you out of the waiver analysis, would let you do those things. But then the minute you kind of went beyond the 5%, went beyond the 400 square feet, then you're in waiver land, right? You've got to go and that's going to trigger the waiver. But the problem is that C just doesn't, to me, that kind of doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think what C would mean then is that it's not an exemption at all. If you have a lot after May 2nd, 2000, you want to do something on it, you're going to need to get a waiver.
Yeah, that's how I would say it. It's do not pass go, do not collect $200. Go get your waiver if you want to do anything.
Yeah, I
The
definitely
other two
think
options
you
have
need a
some
waiver.
wiggle room.
Yeah, I definitely think if it meets C, it definitely needs a waiver. But then my question is where it says considerations in association with granting of a waiver shall include A through C.
So hold
Are
on.
we going to require them to submit a waiver just to say this complies with A or B?
But doesn't considering a waiver, doesn't that just mean we can say you don't need a waiver? Considerations with granting a waiver. No, we don't need to grant you a waiver. Your project is less than 400 square feet.
Yeah, I think I wish it said requiring instead of granting in that situation. If that's what it implies, I feel like that would be a better word for it. But
So-
maybe that's what it means. Maybe that's what it meant to say.
I think we kind of live in section E buffer zone. Sub 6. So this is all, E is all, so what I've been doing is indenting things to kind of cluster the text with sections that it works on. Let me see if I can join on my desktop.
You'll have to let her in, Jackie.
Oh,
I
I'll
think
stop sharing.
if I'm understanding what Maureen's trying to do. I mean, it sounds like, these are confusing enough that we really need to devote some time to figuring out how to make these more clear in the actual like way they're structured. They don't necessarily have to get rewritten, is what I'm understanding. Like the actual, I mean, occasionally there's a word or two that's confusing, but like organizing the almost flow chart of this kind of needs some work.
Yeah, I think especially making it clear for like the average project, which tends to be a buffer zone project
Yeah.
or riverfront, but that's its own chart of riverfront regulations, which DEP has plenty of resources on.
Right.
It is very confusing for riverfront too. But at least DEP has all the resources explaining how the riverfront regulations work, which we don't have. And any applicant who's like new to working in Topsfield has to digest our regulations.
So can I share my screen?
I tried to make you a co-host in case that helps you be able to share your screen. Okay.
It's coming up.
Okay. So just to try to parse this out, I've had to, wrestle with difficult prose before, and I find that if I like annotate the text myself, that it helps bring clarity. So we're living in, we're talking about our Topsfield Regulation 10 sub 4, presumptions of significance and performance standard. And it goes through the different categories of presumption, freshwater wetlands. If the presumption of significance is not overcome, any proposed water shall not destroy or otherwise alter any portion. So this doesn't say you can't do stuff except as provided for maintenance and then bodies of water are presumed to be significant. If the presumption of significance is not overcome, the work shall conform with the standards, paragraph C, regarding land. And then this is unambiguous. This is a restriction in sub B. No project may be permitted which will have an adverse effect on a vernal habitat, except as in paragraph I. Is I the waiver? So you can't, this is where we're separating waivers from maintenance. So if a project will have an adverse, if the presumption of significance is not overcome and the project won't be permitted, which will have an adverse effect on the vernal pool habitat unless you get a waiver. No pollutants, no pesticides. When we're talking about banks, land subject to flooding, and then E, buffer zone. This is where we've been, this is kind of where we live, right? So I took sub E and I indented 2 and 3 and 4 in the subsections so that they all line up and we know these presumptions may be overcome. So this is where the judgment of the commission in F and G allow maintenance, man-made roads, uses, the like. This is where, our discretion, not enlarging, minimally comply with best practice measures. So this is, so let's see. They should have put little titles.
What does the asterisk in brackets mean?
It means pay particular attention to the state regulations.
Okay.
So here is.
Thank you.
Here's E with its subsections. buffer zones, presumed significant. The commission presumes that work within the areas will adversely affect the capacity to contribute. So this is a presumption. If you're within 100 feet of the vernal pool, it's presumed. 100 feet of freshwater bank, it's presumed. 100 feet of downhill boundary, presumed adverse effect, unless it can be proved runoff flow. So here's a specific regulation. No work shall occur in setback areas except as provided for maintenance or if you get a waiver. And then you're right, it loops around. Considerations in association with considering the waiver shall include but not be limited to. So that means that the considerations in sub G or sub I can supplement the considerations here. And these are consider the date of purchase, the date of construction or building date, and then total square feet added. These things have to be outside of the buffer zone as much as possible.
We've had lots of
So
septic systems where, you know, it said as much as possible and they couldn't put it anywhere else.
Mhm.
so structures before 2000, you've got this numerical value, which, you know, kind of weighs against the waiver. Proposed activities exceeding additional 5%. And then only is allowed as necessary. This is, and then newly formed lots after May 2000, you don't get these graces because you shouldn't have built with these problems. Pollutants, pesticides, manure, 4, 5, town water, 6, 5 sub 6, 5 sub A. These presumptions are rebuttable and may be overcome by a clear showing that the nature of the proposed work, special design measures, construction controls, or site conditions will not reduce the ability of the buffer zone to contribute to protected interests. So, kind of historically looking at how we handle things, you know, if we're not using formal waivers, this subsection 6 regarding setbacks under the buffer zone areas, you know, rebutting, we are the requesters who have successfully rebutted the presumption of adverse effect to the environment by showing a clear showing that the nature of the work, their design measures, their construction controls, their site conditions won't reduce the ability of the buffer zone to contribute to protected interests. So I think that this section sub 6 that I've highlighted sitting in this other text, really newly formatted so that you kind of see where sub provisions, you know, get organized with the stuff that goes above it. These presumptions are rebuttable. I mean, so this may be kind of where we work and we make judgment calls without formally requiring a waiver.
Just to confirm, this is only for buffer zones, though.
This is only for buffer. So if we go back up,
Well, no, wetlands as well, right? Wetlands. riverfront, I thought.
No,
So-
we're in E right now.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So if we're in E and kind of the visual aid of the indentations, we're in E in sub 1 through sub 7 sit in E.
Right. So can I just ask another quick question? Hopefully.
However, there's another, like for 6, this 6 is the presumption, overcoming the presumption, talking about the buffer zones. There's also F, the presumptions for A to C are rebuttable and may be overcome. So what's D? Why is D left out?
So
Land
these are-
subject to flooding.
So okay, so land subject to flooding is not under.
Yep.
Mean that nothing can happen in land subject to flooding, or anything can happen?
You can't.
Does that make any sense?
The presumption. The presumption isn't overcome.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
the presumption that there won't be trouble in flood areas isn't overcome.
Okay.
I don't know. Does this make more sense?
This is helping tremendously.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so like take it from the top.
Maureen,
What does
sorry.
it mean?
Yeah, but are you saying that if the presumption is overcome, then as long as you show that the nature of the work, as long as it involves special design measures, construction controls, site conditions, and won't reduce the ability of the buffer zone to contribute, then you can do it. But the problem with that is, what the heck does 2 above mean, where it specifically says no work shall occur in the setback areas? Is that
So we'll just go down the setbacks. So because there's like, you know, the powerful legal word shall, you know, that's a contractual obligation, or you know, a regulatory obligation. So let's just go down to.
But the buffer zone is defined as being 100 feet. So this is where the thing is not really, the reference to a setback, it doesn't matter. It's 100 feet. Buffer zone is defined as being 100 feet horizontally outward from the boundary of freshwater wetlands, bodies of water, including vernal pools and land underwater and banks. So now when it shifts to setback area,
The presumption is of adverse effect.
yes, yeah, I'm with you on that.
So no work shall occur except for maintenance or if you get a waiver. So considerations in granting waiver has to do with the dates it was built and the total additional footage necessary, for septic, and then the accommodations of A and B above don't apply for lots after May 2020. Pollutants, manure, access to town water, and we're still in the wetlands setback. These presumptions, presumably of this subsection E, are rebuttable and may be overcome by a clear showing that the nature of the work, special measures, construction controls, site conditions will not reduce the ability of the buffer zone to contribute to the protected interests.
Question: does that imply that the A and B, I think, the first 2 that were not in the section of are not rebuttable?
Could you restate the question?
If you scroll back up, so we're in for zones right now. So the vernal pools, for example, those the presumptions of the vernal pool are not rebuttable because there's no clause that allows it to be rebuttable.
Here, yes, sub
Okay.
F.
Okay, thank you.
C?
Yep, understood.
Sub F addresses A through C.
Okay, great.
And then D has to do with floods. E has to do with setbacks, which because to wetlands and setbacks, because that's where a lot of the action takes place,
Yep.
I guess. So that E has 1.7, because that's where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, yep, I'm with you. Thank you.
So commission may allow maintenance, man-made ponds, drainage easements, agricultural uses already lawfully exist as of the date of the adoption, which is 93. So if you're doing maintenance, you may need an RDA or an NDA, appropriate measures. And then minimally comply with best measures, and then waiver. The commissioner may, by affirmative vote, 4 members, one or more of the regulations, i.e. the shall requirements from A through E, which are the different subsets, starting with freshwater and ending with wetlands. Upon consideration, waiver request in writing, and the is important here. I think the and is over restrictive. I don't know. It says the commission finds that this and.
Yeah, I think the last one,
That's
D,
okay.
seems like it shouldn't be mandatory, in my opinion, if it has mitigating measures that are proposed that would allow it to condition so as to contribute to the interest. Because we have projects where they're proposing something that's overall an improvement for the resource area, given the amount of mitigation that they're doing and or restoration. And I don't think we should be prohibiting their projects if it's an improvement overall, just because it's not necessary for an overriding public interest. But that's
What is overriding public interest?
We found it
In
was
part,
we did another project where it was like a utility. That was the work that was being done. It was, I think, I don't know if Dodds might remember this. They were trenching along Perkins Row and
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I
remember
remember.
that? And they were
Mhm.
drilling, and so the public
Yep.
interest in that case was the fact that they were providing utilities to a large area. I think we had another one over on Perkins Row. It's always over on Perkins Row with they were connecting houses to like a water main, and that was the question that came up, whether or not it was satisfying a public
Wasn't there
interest.
one over near, hmm, as you go out towards Masconomet on the right, where there's water, they had water troubles in Boxford or something, and it affected Topsfield?
Oh, maybe, yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
think
there was.
Drake had like a similar waiver, I think. And I've heard of it being used for schools too, like expanding a school or something like that can be argued to be a public interest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's to look, the bottom line is that's why this waiver provision as drafted just doesn't work, because it would make it impossible to grant a waiver, because to just put an addition on a house is not what public interest is that serving? You might argue, okay, it's providing housing, but that clearly wasn't the case in the last meeting. So the way that this is drafted, maybe those are that the commission should make findings with respect to each of these things, but the way that it's drafted is that the we have to actually find that there is no alternative, that there were mitigating measures, that it is in the public interest. We're supposed to reach those conclusions. It would be impossible to do that, I think, in most instances. So it would really take make this an ineffective provision. And
Well,
then there's also, sorry, go ahead.
Folks, I've got to take a break because I hear my new puppy crying and I got to find out what's
Oh.
going on with her. So you can continue, it's fine with me, but I just need 5 minutes to see what she's up to. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think a waiver is only required if we're not talking about if the so we're allowed if we conclude that the presumption of damage to the resource is overcome by showing the nature of the proposed work, design measures, construction controls, not reduce the ability of the buffer zone to contribute to the protected interests.
But is that what is that what F you're talking about? F with the presumption of the paragraphs A through C?
I'm talking about as well as 6 here that's highlighted that is for E. So all of the of probable damage to the resource can be rebutted.
But how do you reconcile that with number 2, where it doesn't make any reference to, if the presumption isn't
Yeah.
rebutted? You know what I mean? It's not, it just says it flat out, no work shall occur in the setback area except pursuant to maintenance or a waiver. And that has those 3, A through C there. I mean, it doesn't say, in cases where the presumption has not been rebutted, comma, no work shall occur in the setback area except subject to these other requirements. It just, and I'm not like, it's just badly, they did a great job, it was very comprehensive. It just, this is a conflict. I don't know. Is it the absence of that language that we imply that that's what they meant? I don't know.
If you were going to fix it, how would you fix this?
For me personally, it feels like the provisions up above with the years and the how, like, to me those read more like exemptions that,
Yep.
except for C, which is a conflict. It says you can't do anything on a new lot, and I would say in that case you need a waiver. But it feels to me like those are almost exemptions that, yes, it contemplates that you're going to build in the buffer zone under these very, specific situations. I'm just trying to get to that provision. I keep going back and forth. And then if you're not one of those exemptions, then you go into waiver land. And then the question is, in the waiver section, as drafted, does this really function? I think that an applicant should have to talk about alternatives. They should talk about mitigation. They should talk about, maybe if they can't do alternatives or mitigate, or, you know, maybe the overriding public interest trumps that. I don't know. But I don't think that we can, as a commission, be handing out waivers under this section, because you're hardly ever going to have an overriding public interest and all those other things. I mean, an applicant can always mitigate. They can always discuss alternatives. Um, you know, but they're not really going to be able to show that something is necessary to accommodate an overriding public interest. And so I think we need to redesign what's required to get a waiver, and be very clear about when a waiver really is required.
What's the difference between 6 and B? 6 up above, I would think you wouldn't need a waiver for. So I would say 6F, the two you have highlighted, right? And then if you go down to waiver provisions, what's the difference between those two statements? And then I think it's B down in waiver provisions.
You're talking about the mitigating?
Yeah, which
Right.
which I believe the two things up top talk about mitigating as well.
Will not reduce the ability.
You're doing special design measures,
Yeah.
construction controls. Those are all mitigations, right?
Yeah.
So,
I know. It's just
so why would you need a waiver then? Because you can do the mitigation before you get to the point where you need a waiver.
I feel
yeah.
like the difference between the special design measures and construction controls or site conditions versus mitigation is that the special design measures, construction controls, and site conditions, I think, are more like things that would prevent the project from altering the specific interests of the buffer zone. Like, for example, the site conditions are such that the work in the buffer zone is not going to um, like be in the same watershed as the wetland because they're separated by like a hill or something, or like the construction design is preventing any of the work from getting into the wetlands using like a silt fence. That's kind of how that reads to me, versus mitigation is typically referring to like doing a planting area to compensate for like a structure that you're building or something like that.
Like for like replacement.
Yeah, it's sort of like you're building a structure of such and such size, and then you're
Okay.
restoring an area that's degraded in some way or is just not natural in some way, like lawn, into like a habitat for wildlife with native plants and all that. So I think it's kind of referring to a different thing.
But Jen's right. This statement, just read affirmatively, no work shall occur in setback areas except under sub G maintenance or I waiver. It doesn't say no work shall occur in the setback areas described in 1 sub A and sub B and sub C above. It's not qualified. It's any setback area.
So
so
isn't that where you get to any approval is a waiver?
Yeah, I know, but that's not how we've been conducting business, and I don't think that's how we want to conduct business.
I'm trying to compare. Yeah, see, the problem is, I was trying to compare the definition of buffer zone up above, like way up above, on page 1005.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna.
yeah, 1005E, right? And because I was trying to see, like, is there a buffer zone that's like different than what's in that
What's a
later?
setback? So we're looking for the definition. Buffer zone
It's also E, just coincidentally. It's on page 1005, near the top of 1005. It
Yeah,
talks
well,
about,
here in the definition, 100 feet horizontally.
yeah. So I was looking to see if there was some other type of buffer zone that this later provision,
So where do you want me to go, 105?
yeah, 1005 is the page number. And at the top of that, close to the top of it, you'll see that it defines buffer zone in the right section. Oh, hold on a second. Let me go. Oh no, buffer zone. Yeah. Sorry. We can go to 1001. Sorry, my apologize. Under definitions, right? And it encompasses freshwater wetlands, bodies of water, vernal pools, land underwater, and banks 100 feet outward from those things. And then so I was trying to find, like, is there a specific type of buffer zone that's not encompassed in this other section that talks about setback areas on page 1006? And they're all the same, basically. It's, they both of those provisions touch on vernal pools. They both touch on freshwater wetlands, banks, bodies of water. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of weird that they,
What's the definition of resource area?
um,
We've got a nested definition within the definition.
I think a resource area, let's see, probably just encompasses, I think, all of those things, but I don't remember if that one was defined. It's not defined, but it shows up.
Just find the first instance.
I don't know, I can't seem to find. Oh, you know what? So identification of resource areas is in the title of section R10-3.
No, it's in the resource areas defined.
Let's see.
The resource area is the stuff covered by the Wetlands Protection Act, the
Oh, yeah,
Rivers
yep.
Protection Act, and the wetlands bylaws. It's defined here under 10 sub 1 sub A. So basically the resource area is
Everything, yeah. So then I was looking at, buffer zone and what that encompasses. And there's, it's just 100 feet from all of these other things. And then going back down to that section.
Here's some more interesting text about kind of judgment by the commission. The commission decides whether a proposed activity will affect a protected resource. Presumption of significant. If the commission allows a project, it decides which specific conditions it shall impose in order to fulfill its statutory regulations. And these terms in turn, that's not helpful. These terms in turn provide the title for the section that we've been spending time trying to understand.
Yeah, so the presumptions of significance and performance standards are also in the Wetlands Protection Act. So it's kind of adopting that same idea for the bylaw. And where it says, where it mentions, I think was it in 6, where it mentions the presumptions of significance and like overcoming them?
Yep. Well, in both instances. So there's further down the ability to overcome the presumption for A, B, C, not D, and then E has its own overcoming the presumption of significance.
The presumptions being rebuttable. Yeah, that part.
Right. So E has its own. You can rebut the presumptions, and then F also says you can do the same for A through C. But
Okay.
you can't rebut the presumption of that the presumption that a proposed activity will negatively affect a protected resource area. You can't do that for flood zones. You can do that for the other 3 categories, and then even though it may be redundant, when we're talking about just sub E, which is buffer zones and setback.
Okay. Yeah, generally, the presumption, overcoming a presumption means that you're deciding in a specific case that, like, say the buffer zone or whatever your resource area is in this specific site or this specific work area is not significant to the like that specific interest. So like an applicant, this can happen under the Wetlands Protection Act, but an applicant can come forward and say, here are the reasons why the buffer zone in this location is not significant to wildlife habitat, and give reasons why, like it does not support wildlife habitat, it has no habitat for wildlife, because it's just a parking lot, or I don't know. And then the commission can decide whether they agree that they've overcome that presumption of significance. And then they no longer have to meet criteria associated with protecting that resource area value, or that interest of the bylaw. Because these are all a list of interests protected by the bylaw. So those are like the things that give us the authority to have requirements for applicants, because we're charged with protecting certain interests by the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. Just big picture, like that's how I understand like the big picture of what our authority is because we have the authority to protect these specific interests, like wildlife habitat, flood control, etc.
So we're talking about freshwater wetlands where the presumption of significance is not overcome. Any proposed work shall not destroy or otherwise alter any portion of the area except under maintenance or a waiver.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems to me that if we're talking about work proposed in a freshwater wetland, if we conclude that the work on the site shall not destroy or alter any portion, then they don't have to claim maintenance or waiver.
But that's wetlands. Buffer zone was different, was it not?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, kind of.
Yeah, that's right. Like, say they're like, I don't know, if someone's putting in like a I don't know, like a rope swing over a pond or something, and we say like, oh, it doesn't alter the resource area. I don't know. I for lack of better example of something, we can decide that it will not alter, and that's why they don't need a permit or why they don't need anything further. But it's like rare that we would do that in an actual wetland, because most things that you do in a wetland, like a body of water or a bordering vegetated wetland, are going to alter or compromise the resource area values. But overcoming the presumption is where they can, like, or rebutting the presumption is where they prove to you in a specific case that this specific buffer zone area or wetland or whatever it is does not protect this specific interest of the bylaw, like water quality. But DEP says you shouldn't, like, you should be very careful about letting applicants claim such a thing, because it's rare that like a wetland would not be protecting those interests that it is presumed to protect. But in a rare case, theoretically, an applicant could do that. But it's not something we're going to see very often, if at all.
So do we better understand what the bylaws say, or this has been kind of a trip down a rabbit hole?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was planning on doing this anyway.
Yeah, I think it's sort of brought to light the specific parts of this section that need to be
Clarified.
clarified. I think for now I understand we basically need a narrative of the waiver criteria for like the average project. And I think I understand like what the general criteria are. I think I'm not entirely clear on them being able to use like section 6. I feel like that is only if they're really rebutting the presumption, which I think is like not usually applicable.
Yeah, it's going to sound to me like most projects are going to need a waiver, correct? Any project in the buffer zone, which
In
is
the buffer
mostly
zone.
what we're going to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I read these regulations.
Yeah.
Although we can always change them eventually, but
Yeah.
So then I go back
Which
to
brings us
when someone
back to,
applies for
how do
something,
we,
is the paperwork sufficient?
I mean, it sounds like if we draft a worksheet that you go through some of this stuff, then that should answer most of the questions. I mean, I think most of the time these things are answered in the narrative. Like Jackie says, sometimes that narrative is 50 pages, and to hunt through to make sure each thing is met can be difficult. So,
yeah, I think making the worksheet will at least lay it out in a way that makes sense for the applicant when they're, or the representative when they're putting together their application. Like they'll be able to read through and like as they're reading through realize that they need to meet these waiver criteria if they're not aware already. So I think like as a temporary measure, as while we work on revising our regs to make them more clear, I think making it as clear as possible in like a checklist kind of thing with a fill in the blank for describe how you meet this waiver criteria.
I think that makes sense. And do we, in meetings, want to start voting on things more explicitly, like the waiver versus the project?
I think so.
I think so too.
Okay, so should I put in the notes? I'm writing the note to myself to do this, to add to the meeting notes, like the waiver vote.
Yeah. So we would close the hearing, vote on the waiver, and then vote to approve the project. For
Is
your
that the
average
order?
NOI.
Is that the order that we should do things?
I don't know.
if-
I'm just asking.
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
know if
so.
we're allowed to vote on the waiver before we close the hearing or if, I don't know.
You know, we could look at a previous one that we've done. Dodds and I can definitely point you in the right direction. We can go and look at the minutes and kind of see how that worked, and I'm sure we can get some guidance on that.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, I definitely feel like I have a better understanding of it. The actual, it's still a little bit above my brain power on this, but I do feel like I have a better sense of it. Um, I think that for your average person reading these regulations that was not in this meeting, it's obviously very difficult. And so for just a homeowner, they're going to probably have a wetlands sign to their consultant that has read these, and I guess I just don't want to lose the momentum that we have right now of our really good understanding of it. And so, I mean, what is our plan for getting a better version of this together? Like, we can leave the meeting tonight, go to our next meeting, and try to start implementing some of this stuff. But if in another year from now, this is all going to be back in the filing cabinet if we haven't sort of worked through the way that these are structured. And I just don't want to lose the momentum that we have gathered over the past couple weeks on this.
Jackie, when you redid your, I'm tacking on, Andrew, what you're saying.
Yep.
When you redid regulations where you came from with Drake it, did you redo the all of the regulations, or was it just parts of it?
So when I made the conservation land use regulations, that was from scratch, although I borrowed from other towns because we didn't have any. And that was like a specific issue we had because we had a lot of town conservation land with no rules of what people could do on it. With our wetland regulations, all I did was, I think, just adding, um, I'm trying to remember for the bylaw, I definitely just added and fixed the things that the commission had asked for, which were like specific things. Um, I'm trying to remember what we had for wetland regulations. And it might have just been like, I honestly forget if those were from scratch or not. Yeah, it feels like so long ago now. But yeah, I'm comfortable making an attempt at just rewriting them, but I think I sort of need input from the commission along the way because this is like a 48-page document and I don't want to go too far without like having input because I work for you guys. Like I want to make sure this is in the spirit of what the commission wants as appointed members of this board who live in Topsfield and have the actual authority. So I don't know if it makes sense to do like maybe a working group that meets outside of our regular meetings for anyone who's interested in working on it with me, like ideally less than a quorum, just to make it simpler for us to just create a draft to bring back to the commission. Or if we want to each sort of like, I mean, I can take Jen's edits and try and work those in and work in what we discussed today and then bring it back to the commission or bring it back to Jen, or I don't know what
Well,
makes sense.
I mean, my edits, I think when I was working on this, I think with Heidi, I realized that the overall document, just from an organizational standpoint, it just doesn't work well. So you can try to like, there are definitely inconsistencies that I found and questions I had, but I don't think that anything that I did, I certainly spotted problems, but I really feel that it needs an overhaul. That's
Okay.
that's my instinct. I mean, just showing how much difficulty we've had tonight, I'm not sure. I mean, I think we've issue spotted tonight,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
do we still know how this thing works? We're gonna try to make it work, but
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, I'd like to try it as a long-term project, but the
yeah.
more we're overhauling it versus fixing it, the longer term of a project it's going to be
Mhm.
because
Right,
it's
and
a huge amount of regulations. And then I sort of fear that if we overhaul it, there's going to be things that we miss that are like there's going to be a whole different set of things that we didn't consider that whoever wrote this version did consider.
I'm not
Does
so
that make sense?
I'm not so sure there's a ton in there. I think what the authors did was they plugged in a lot of stuff that probably could be like an addendum. I really do think
Yeah.
like, the soil stuff, that
Mhm.
doesn't need to be part of the regulation. The stormwater
Okay.
runoff, my understanding is that we needed to address that anyway, but that might need to be its own separate. And I think that's kind of part of the problem. Like when you go to look at something like Ipswich, for instance, you know, you go and you look at their regulations and it's 26 pages long. I'm looking at it right now. And there is like a comprehensive table of contents for every section, and some of it's about, you know, the standards of review that apply, and the you know, goes into each individual application. It goes into the, you know, there's a section that would cover each of the resource areas and the presumptions. Then there's a section on public hearing. I mean, it's all like extremely organized. Violations, fees, but some of this stuff really doesn't need to go in there. I think it's just they were really trying to make a robust document, and it's just like overcomplicated. But I'm not saying that you need to take on that task and completely rewrite it. I feel like um, there's got to be a middle ground, you know, like a
Maybe we can sort of like reorganize, like sort of copy paste things into different orders and then take things out into addendums to make it easier to read.
yeah.
What's
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the process for approval? What's the process to approve making changes?
So I think in Drake It, all we had to do was just post it as like a topic at a public meeting for us to revise our regulations. I don't know if Topsfield as a town has more specific requirements, like um, of like notifying the public in some way. So I might ask town council when we get to that point, um, if there are any like further requirements about making it like publicizing that information somehow.
Frankly, we're all volunteers, and we're not necessarily qualified in, I mean, we're not professionals to write something like this. Is there any organization that done this for this town and this town, and we tell them what we're looking for and they can rewrite some of it?
A nonprofit bylaw drafting do-gooder organization?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
don't any of you agree with that?
There may be.
I don't,
Maybe.
yeah, I'm not aware of it, but I know,
I don't. Right.
I know
Or-
MACC doesn't like, or no, DEP doesn't like to weigh in on bylaws like at all. Like the DEP circuit rider will not weigh in on anything bylaw related. Other than the fact that like we have an authority to have a bylaw.
I mean, I think that it's as simple as looking like at all of the regulations around us, communities around us that are similarly situated, and saying, "Hey, this is pretty good," you know, and then, you know, maybe we can fit in the stuff that we have that's missing from their regulations and try to make it work. But I think going to Mac and saying, "Hey, what do you guys suggest?" Because they do seem, I'm looking at their website, and they do have some model
Yeah, we have
um
model bylaw, maybe model regulations too.
for certain things. Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like not everything, but that would be ideal to have.
It really would be, because we all have our thoughts on it, and I think there must be some, I don't mean to say professional, because several of you, obviously, that's what you do for a living, but I mean, a specialist in this field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, is it possible we could even hit up one of, say, some of our environmentalists that appear before us? Hit them up to do a couple of paragraphs or something?
No.
I
No,
mean, it's tough because there's a conflict of interest there,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
You
I
know,
know.
Do us a favor and help us rewrite our bylaws. We'll
Yeah.
smile at you.
I know it's all in their favor. I understand that.
I mean,
Well-
they can certainly weigh in and give their opinion in a public meeting on our proposed changes if they want to. But I don't think we can ask them to do that for us as
Draft, the
like
actual
a favor.
drafting. No.
Yeah.
Drafting.
No, but it was
This kind
the
of
idea of
proposed drafting
someone of that type,
proposed-
of that nature, who was not maybe someone from another cities.
Yeah, I might be able to reach out to like my network of conservation agents to see if anyone else is willing to take a look at it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the other thing too is, like the waiver thing, maybe it's just retooling the waiver provision, so that it makes sense. I mean, I don't know, how did the rest of you folks feel in reading it? And, part of it is we have to protect the resource areas. That's our job, but then
No.
it has to be sort of reasonable. So, I mean, I don't know, what is everybody else's impression of the waiver provision?
I want to let it simmer, kind of this kind of analysis. You dig in, you kind of, it's peeling an onion,
Yeah.
right? In solutions may reveal themselves that aren't apparent right now, having done kind of like this first annotated exercise looking at the text and figuring out and making it easier to glean what the draft person intended.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think some time to sit on this is good, but I also, like I said earlier, I don't want to lose momentum.
Yeah. Maybe we, I don't know. There are a couple of things, do we just contact the people in some other jurisdiction and say, we like your prose, can we borrow it? Do you um, any copyright issues if we clone your document and use it here in Topsfield because it's clearer and the ultimate goal of any legal drafting is clarity, and our document lacks clarity. Because and we could spend dozens of hours revamping the existing document. It's kind of a judgment call, right? Do you do you move in and repair the house while you're living here room by room, or do you knock it down and build fresh?
Yeah, maybe we can take like an example that's simple and then work in the stuff that we want to keep from our more complicated portions. Um, yeah, I was just looking back at the Drake waiver criteria, and it's just so simple. Like,
That's how
it's
it
like
should
half a
be.
page. And I don't know if that like includes all of the like situations that you would need, but like here it is. Like we redid this waiver thing because previously it was just
Okay.
like totally up to the discretion of the commission, but now it's like just these 4 criteria and they may seek a waiver. And this is probably not like the best well written, like we didn't have any legal experts on the commission at the time. So who knows if this has loopholes or whatever, but that's like an example of something that's super simple. There's probably more that it should have, but yeah.
And these waiver factors 1 through 4 are substantively very similar than the waiver
Mhm.
factors that we have in section E or section G.
Yeah, I feel like they're pretty common between different communities of like which exceptions would be worthy of granting a waiver. It's just I think communities differ on whether you need to meet all of them or just some of them and like which of them are absolutely necessary versus not. Like in this case, we said it needs to meet one of the 4 criteria at least, but at
No
the
build zone.
discretion
Oops, sorry.
Yeah,
at the discretion of the
and
commission. Yeah, the no build
yeah.
zone was like a specific resource area we had there, which we don't have a no build zone here. And maybe we should. I don't know if we want that. Like it's a common thing that most towns will have. Like they'll have the buffer zone, but then the no build zone of like how close to the wetland you can build.
Like 50 feet or 25 feet, something like that.
I was going to ask if it was comparable to the buffer zone, but it sounds like it's more restrictive.
Yeah, so I mean, there it's more restrictive, but here we kind of consider the whole buffer zone to be no build zone if it's a new lot.
Mm.
So it's kind of like we're stricter than that for a new lot, but then for the older lots, maybe maybe it would be better to just have a no build zone for future, like at least like 25 feet. I don't know. It's like how close do we want to allow building to a wetland, even on an older lot?
Hmm.
I think the other thing that needs to be clarified is just the trigger for the waiver, because that's what seems to be confusing in our regulations. Like, what is the trigger? Because are these three or two different scenarios with pre-existing lots? Do they truly trigger the waiver? I mean, do they get you out of the waiver language? So it just seems like that question needs to be.
Yep, that's a fundamental question that I
Yeah,
don't think is resolved by the text.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's
I
like we
think
have
that
our
it's
three
time to put a
different
pin.
scenarios. Oh, go ahead.
I just think I want to reflect on this. I want to put down that document, pick it up again tomorrow, and
Yeah.
On a different note, I had brought up at the last
third
meeting.
reading.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, at the last meeting, a discussion of after the fact fees.
Yeah.
And potentially adjusting those. I don't think I saw that on the agenda, so I'm not sure that we can discuss it, or I don't know if we want to, or
I think it was on
We
the
can,
agenda.
we just put in regulations in general.
okay. So yeah, I guess my initial thought is, just maybe a 2x or a 4x increase to the fee schedule for things that are done after the fact or coming to us after the fact, just to sort of further incentivize asking for permission rather than forgiveness. So happy to hear people's comments on that.
That one I would agree, because it happened to us over and over again.
I struggle with that if I feel like our house isn't in order. When we struggle to look at the regs and agree on how the regs should be enforced and how to grant a waiver, I don't know how we expect the public to be more educated.
Oh, this is
But
for,
the fees are like $75. So the fees for, if you file a request for an RDNA, some people are like, I'm just going to.
I think I lost.
And I think it's kind of bad faith. I don't think it's.
yeah, Maureen, you're kind of cutting in and out, but I think I understood what she was trying to say. I think it's that like for our fees, it's like sometimes people will say like I'm just going to do the work and then ask for a permit afterwards because like I'm in a hurry or like whatever it may be. Um but then so Andrew's proposing that we sort of incentivize them to go through the proper process of requesting a permit and going through our review, um, by charging higher fees for permits that are after the fact. Like for if someone does work without a permit, we will often issue an enforcement order requiring them to seek an after the fact permit. Um, so having higher fees for after the fact permits would create an incentive for people to try to comply with our permitting requirements by seeking a permit before they do the work.
So these would be both the file and just again, not necessarily, what it should be, but just we have the actual filing paperwork, portion of it, and then for some things like basically the square footage cost of it, right? For work that's being done, there's often like a per square foot, like I think it's like 25 cents per square foot for some stuff. So it would be those types of fees. And I mean, we can at any point basically choose to waive fees. So if someone genuinely in our mind is, it was done accidentally or because of an emergency, I suppose we could still consider, not charging that extra amount or something
Yeah.
that stays in our discretion.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have like make sure we have a way around it if necessary. Like if it's a really high fee for something that was an accident or emergency work, yeah, I agree. We should have a way to not charge the double fee or extra fee.
Yeah. I don't know. Just lately, there's been so much after the fact stuff that I'm like, you put that like 4 feet from the wetland. You should have talked to us. You knew that.
And you think people willfully know that?
I do.
Okay.
So do you
I
think that if it's only a portion of their project that was after the fact, that only that portion would need the extra fee? Like say like the one we saw before where they have a shed and then they also have their addition.
I think that if they're coming to us before they do it, it should be normal. And if it's something that's already in place, then that is, requiring of an incentive to not have to do that again, and an incentive for other people to not do that.
But
And
say it's for the square footage
Mhm.
in that case. So they're coming to us for a house addition that they have not built yet, but
Mhm.
they have already built a shed. So would we piece it out or would
Yes,
we charge them? Okay.
I think
We
that we
wouldn't
would
Didn't
charge
piece
they
them
that.
move
double
the
for
shed? Didn't they move the shed further away from the wetlands?
in that case they did, but they
So,
didn't
like,
ask
isn't
for permission.
But what would we
but
charge
when yeah,
to
we're
do
worried about
that
the
if it was
resource, I thought, though.
but
Huh?
what would we normally charge to do that if it was asked of us, correct? Would we charge a square footage to move
I don't
something?
remember off the top of my head, but I think it depends. Like I know for like for a driveway project that's happening right now, it is being charged by square footage and it's like over $1,000 because it's a significant square footage. Um, but I don't know if the shed and the addition were charged by square footage. I don't remember. I have to still read the fee form every time someone applies for a project to make
Right.
sure.
I don't know these off the top of my head, but my inclination would be that if they're just moving something and there's no net plus or minus, of necessarily impact to the resource area, then that's not something that we would charge square footage wise. Um, but new things like the addition, I
Yeah.
would think would have a certain square footage associated with it, and I can definitely think of additions and things that have been charged by the square foot for the addition for the
Okay, so
footprint of
maybe
it.
it is. Yeah, and then in that specific case, the new shed was larger than the old sheds. Then maybe in that case, we would just charge for the extra square footage if
Yeah,
it's by square footage.
yeah. I mean, it's another layer of math to do, which I don't necessarily want to add onto your plate. But I just feel like there's so many lately in the past year or two that I mean, I've only been on the commission for 4 years, but I just still feel like I'm seeing this upward trend. Jen, I don't know if you agree with that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think during COVID, that really was the major uptick because everybody was doing stuff at their homes to make it, more enjoyable place to be. And so we saw a ton of that. I mean, the reality is that something happens, somebody reports the change and then it comes to us and there's a notice of violation and then they're required to get a notice of intent or whatever other relief it is for the thing that they did. And so at that point, that's when the double fee probably kicks in to try to, because this is all about legalizing what they did,
Mhm.
and so that's, so I don't think we need to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think we're all in agreement that, there has to be a penalty, whether it's double. I mean, I was even just doing some quick and dirty research and it was like someplace charged 10 times,
Yeah, I mean, if we are charging a quarter per square foot for things that are done on time, I'm honestly thinking something like $1 per square foot for things done after the fact. So it'd be a 4x increase.
Yeah, maybe there's a cap or something, you know?
Sure.
Maybe that's what we do. We cap it so that, you get that penalty, but up to
Yeah,
a
I can just imagine though, if it's a huge amount, like the applicant is gonna fight us on it, and then like, do we really want to deal with that?
But they,
If it's like,
if it's a huge amount and they're asking for something after the fact, I mean, that's a big problem. That did not
Proportionality.
come in before us. That should be
yes,
strongly
Yeah.
disincentivized.
it
Yeah, I
is a
agree.
problem, but at the same time, like our teeth to enforce, like it can be difficult.
No,
And
I appreciate that.
I think we want to
Well,
make it reasonable
Yeah.
on some level.
yeah, I mean, we could certainly cap it, I mean, I
Like
don't.
not so high that they'll try and like go to court over it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we talk to like the building department and just because they do the same thing, if you build something and didn't get a permit, they'll charge, double the permit fee or whatever. And so if we could certainly do something that's in line with an existing,
Mhm,
um, an existing department.
Yeah,
mhm.
I think building department charges double
Okay.
Yeah,
for
that's
after the
good.
fact.
We could start there and see how
Yeah.
it
No, I'm
goes.
fine being in line with building.
Yeah, that works. Do we, I don't know, do we need to vote? I guess because if we change our regulations, we probably need to, because this
Yeah,
would
and we'll
change.
need to have a draft fee schedule or draft
Okay,
regulatory language.
Okay.
Um,
that works.
but yeah, we can add that to the list of things to change.
Folks, I kind of suggest you plan your future steps on what we do next because it's almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think this is going to be a long-term project. I'm going to
I do
work
too.
on I'm going to work on like trying to get a worksheet or form for the waiver, like a checklist for applicants, because I think that would be helpful for them and for us in the short term. And then long term, I think whenever I have a big chunk of spare time, which hasn't been often lately, I'll try and work on this. And then I also welcome commissioners to submit like drafts or ideas or examples from other towns that you really like.
yeah.
If any of you have time to do research on other towns for inspiration um, or just submit like a list of other problems you've thought of in the regs, all of that would be super helpful. And then, um, yeah, I'm hoping this winter things will quiet down a little bit for me to work more on these type of things. But we do have a huge agenda for next meeting. Um, so I'm going to be busy for the next few weeks, and then I also have um, like green communities report is due. Like there's there's a lot going on. Just submitted an EOI for a grant. Um, we're working on submitting like an application for an award for our automation rollout. This is like the busiest few weeks that I've ever had here. Um, but yeah, hopefully over the winter things will quiet down because no one wants to delineate wetlands in the snow. Um, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's think on it a little bit and look if everybody could take a look at the regulations and maybe there's I think there's probably something we can do short of having you go nuts and try to do a whole new thing. I mean, I think we can, all kind of poke around other towns, see what they have. If you find something and it addresses everything in our bylaw, but maybe in a more organized manner, that's a really easy fix. Um, so I definitely think I don't know, we don't have a solution tonight, but this is a good dialogue for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, I'm really glad we had this discussion. It's good to have just make sure we're all on the same page about what's going on.
Yeah.
I feel like I understand the regs a lot better now, but also understand what needs to change about them.
Yeah, it's got to be easy for the average person to read it and
Mm-hmm.
understand it. That's where you've got to go.
I agree. I really do agree with that.
Yeah,
That's-
I really do enjoy working on regulations. Like I will enjoy this project when I have time for it.
Nice.
I think I was just thinking about the Drake one, and I think I did just write their entire wetland regulation. I think it was from scratch, which means it's probably not very good because I didn't know what I was doing, but I tried.
Oh, no, that could be easier than trying to read through all this and paraphrase
Yeah,
and cutting
exactly.
it down
It's
and
like easier
whatnot.
to start from scratch in some ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Anything else, folks?
No.
All right. Who would like to make a motion?
I motion to close the meeting.
Yes.
Special meeting of the Topsfield Conservation.
Yes.
Oh, my internet connection.
Oh, who's got the motion?
I'll make a motion to close the October 29th special meeting of the Topsfield Conservation Commission at 9:52.
I will second that.
And how do we vote? Todd Shamroth, aye.
Jen DeCarlo, aye.
Andrew Mulholland, aye.
Maureen Bresnahan, aye.
Ben Kayla, aye.